My name's Chris Hutt. I'm Senior Vice President for Strategic Operations at Randstad. Over the course of my time working at Randstad, I've been lucky enough to partner with many of our client organisations across the world. Most recently, over the last 5 years or so, I've been focusing primarily on the life science industry. And I've been working with a number of our brands that you may see on our website or whatever, which we partner with quite closely in RPO, MSP services and other strategic delivery models. Firstly, though, I'd like to welcome you all to the session. I'm looking forward to presenting to you today, really just to talk, as you introduced, about our new talent trends report. From here, what we're hoping to give you today is a bit of a gift around some recommendations or some questions about how we can help you to recharge and re-energize your talent strategies. I'll be using some examples of how we've been working with a number of our customers across the various different trends, and just give you some insights about what we've been doing in partnership with our customers to help them answer their business challenges. Now, of course, the last 2 years, as we all know, has been a major change in our way of working, and the need for human connection has been more important than ever. I've really enjoyed listening to a lot of the presentations so far today to hear how much there's synergy in the things that we've been talking about. And I hope to do the same now as well. Of course, what we've seen over the last 2 years is a real challenge to certainly come out of the pandemic. And how do we address the global shortage of talent? We've seen such things like the Great Resignation being discussed. And I suppose some of the challenges we've been facing is, do people actually want to work for your company in the same way as they did before? Are they looking for more flexible ways of working? And how do we bring a stronger focus on work and life balance in the way that we engage our talent in the workplace? Hopefully, from harnessing this power and this talent and this human connection, what we can do here is help you unleash your talent's full potential. So let's talk about the research. So Randstad's been commissioning this research now, and it's in its 7th year, and it's purely designed to be able to provide our customers and companies and events like this some insights as to what the global industry of life science is telling us. It's conducted across a number of different industries, though, as you can see, and its respondents are more than 900 C-suite and human capital leaders. The survey includes a mixture of different participants, as you can see on the screen. But what we try to focus on is getting a clear, balanced, diverse group, as it were, responding to us. So therefore, we have global, regional and local companies included as part of this survey. And what we're hoping to achieve, as I said, is to provide this insight to you and to others, just to help you design and maybe challenge your own talent strategies and how you can possibly elevate what you're doing today. Of course, with the amount of information, though, that you would imagine that we're probably bringing together, we've needed to take some time out to be able to really boil this down and to simmer it down into 10 different trends. And we've then segregated those into 3 different pillars that we call recharge, refresh and renew. So the 3 things I'd like you to take away from today really is the fact that you need to recharge your talent acquisition strategies where possible, refreshing your talent experience, and renewing the skills across your workforce. But I think, as we heard from Patricia, of course, the need to bring in HR technologies and innovation is also key, and this will really help elevate the power of the people, culture and productivity, of course. So looking at the talent trends overview that I provided on screen here, I've got about 15 minutes or so. So what I'm going to do is go down into 4 of the different trends and take you a little bit further through that. And as I said, bring some of the client experiences. So the first one I'm going to focus on is put your people and their needs at the center of your business strategy. So this is number 1 in the recharge section. We've then got number 2, which is passionately protect diversity, equity, inclusion and belonging. We'll then jump to number 4, which is top of the refresh section, which is obsess about your talent experience and create a game-changing employer brand. And then finally, we will look at integrating market and workforce data for an intelligent advantage. And I definitely, listening to you, Patricia, that sounded very similar to the kind of topics that you were just sharing with us as well. So I like to hear that one. As far as moving into the actual talent trends themselves. So what was interesting when we started to look at trend 1 was actually for the life science and pharmaceutical leaders, all that were surveyed actually recognized the need for offering flexible working arrangements. So that's a great indication that the last 2 years has really changed the way people are focusing about how to engage talent and how to help people back at work. So this was a great indication. And I think being able to offer people flexibility and be able to offer people the opportunity to work from home or have more flexible working certainly supports talent acquisition or talent strategies in general. The other things that we saw indicated through the survey, some of them are quite typical, which are increasing pay rates, salaries and benefits, to answer how can you put people in the centre of your strategy. We also see people focusing on employee well-being, and again, I was happy to hear some of the previous presenters talking about this and the need to introduce and how it benefited their experiences. How do you bring more talent from outside of your typical geographical locations is a real challenge for a lot of companies at the moment. How do you do cross-border engagement and compliance? Focusing on D&I, of course, is always core, and then focusing on working with maybe agencies and other partners as an accelerator to be able to develop a talent strategy. Now, as you can see on screen, with 46% of life science and pharma leaders expecting their permanent workforce to work remotely at least part of the time, what was interesting is to see that life science actually is the leading sector for this across all of the different sectors that were included as part of our survey. The average that we saw across all markets, all industries, was 41%. So therefore, as I said, it's nice to see that life science is ahead and fully embracing the need to be able to be more flexible and agile with the way that we manage their permanent workforce. But with millions of people quitting and taking retirement and changing what their priorities are, of course, as we've heard, companies have got a definite challenge ahead about how to get ahead of this. How do you retain the talent and how do you identify what's needed to be able to bring new talent into your business? I think one of the interesting case studies that we have as Randstad working with one of our clients is a large global lifeline company. They had the challenge where they actually were accelerating growth dramatically in some of their production facilities. And unfortunately, this coincided just at the point where with the post-pandemic world, the talent scarcity and the great resignation was really kicking in. So in partnership with Randstad and some of the data analytics, we were able to really create a new strategy for them, which meant that they were focusing more on skills-based recruitment rather than on the traditional siloed approach that they had before. They hadn't necessarily realized that actually they had a great opportunity to change from the traditional approach. And by taking this skills-based approach, they actually entered the market with a more wider net to attract talent into their business. It meant that they could really offer each candidate what they were looking for. Were they looking for flexible working on a temporary contract or permanent? From their perspective, they had a really holistic view, and this was new to them as a company, and it helped them achieve what they were trying to do in 2021, where in those production facilities, we saw an 80% increase in their FTE headcount, which is in line with what they needed to sustain their business growth. So if we move into the next slide, let's look at some of the questions that you could maybe be asking yourselves. And these three questions could be, do you have a clear understanding of what attracts talent to your organization? What's causing them to leave? Are you surveying employees and candidates frequently enough to understand what they're looking for? See what their perspective is? Are you creating action plans as a result of that? And some common things that we see from working with different companies is even the survey tools that you're using agile enough? Are they the right tools to be using, giving the right user experience? And really importantly, from a data perspective, is it integrated into your HRIS system as well? Are you able to use deeper analysis in line with your own HR data? And then finally, how can you keep track of the rapid labour market changes? As we know, the labour market's changing very dynamically, and how do you keep on top of that, and how do you make the right investments in order to be able to get your leadership team to be able to invest in the right way to be able to get the right talent? Okay, so moving on to trend number 2, passionately protect diversity, equity, inclusion and belonging. It's clear that companies are connecting the dots when it comes to... Here's what I found. Thank you, Siri. It's clear that companies are connecting the dots when it comes to diversity, equity and inclusion, but it's actually not impacting the life science sector as much as we would expect. At the moment, the life science sector is showing lower numbers across the board than we see in other industries. 70%, as you can see on screen, says DE&I is embedded in their talent strategies and is integral to everything they do. This is 16% points lower than what we saw as the global average. And in turn, as we go through some of the other data points that we saw around this topic, 60% of life science leaders say workplace diversity, equity, inclusion are fundamental to attracting, engaging, and retaining talent. Again, a similar number, 16% points lower than the global average. And only 63% believe DE&I are evident and embedded in their organisation and are important to candidates, the lowest percentage that we saw across any sector. So from our perspective, this is something really interesting, and it caused us to ask ourselves a few questions. Is this something that's obviously systematic within the industry? Based on our research, it appears to be so. But what I do know is a lot of companies are addressing this. And how do you bring DE&I more to the forefront of what you do every day? A client of ours has certainly embraced that challenge, and I think over the last few years has been addressing DE&I in more increasing volume and increasing investment, as we saw changes to both their global strategy through their sharers and investors days, and then right down into their leadership and best practices. So first of all, what did they do? Well, they changed the way that their senior leadership were incentivized around this topic. They set country leadership goals and set clear targets with clear measurable metrics about what they were trying to achieve in each market. This in turn brought through a change in recruitment processes, which encouraged a more balanced recruitment process, encouraging the prioritization of DE&I within the training and process management. This was then measured and measured and measured. And ultimately, it's through that senior leadership, guidance and control, it meant that the DE&I strategy started to take effect. In addition to this, there was a strong focus around employer brand. They took things like, for example, the job descriptions, which again, I've heard previously on some other presentations, reviewing the job descriptions, reviewing marketing strategies, looking at the different ways in which these things are worded and presented in order to ensure that there's a more DE&I approach. So a combination with performance management and metrics management, process control and governance, and then coupled with this, with the external customer-facing voice, meant that they were able to really start to turn the dial on their DE&I strategy. Well, what advice can we give to you? Well, I think some of the advice is clear through the example that I just gave, but how do you use data with your clients and communities and candidates? How do you understand who they are, and therefore what problem are you trying to fix? You need to be able to connect the value of DE&I to the outcomes of every employee and help them to understand why a more diverse workforce delivers a better business result. And this is really a message from leadership. Make sure DE&I are embedded in all of your key strategic planning activities, evaluating your language and bias in job descriptions and job requirements, as I mentioned. And then ultimately, you need to use technology to also support the elimination of bias. And this is through the process controls, therefore making sure results and metrics are explainable and transparent. So moving on to talent trend 4. So according to our research, 77% of life science leaders say their organizations are more focused on talent experience, which is higher than ever before. When we started to drill down into some of this data and what this was telling us, it was really interesting to see that 53% were focused more on creating transparency around the recruitment process, workplace culture, and career advancement potentials, using technologies to improve how talent is recruited. 57% are also investing in workplace culture, employee feedback, and engagement systems, trying to better gauge how do people feel and what do they need. And this was a massive jump from what we've seen before, where in 2021, we saw only 45% of the similar respondent groups. So therefore, we saw a 13% increase on this as a priority area. The focus of culture and feedback and engagement is definitely increasing. Life science leaders rely heavily on companies' brands and reputation to be able to attract talent, though. So therefore, they're also doing similar things. So therefore, they're looking at how do you deliver on candidates to offer them a safe and compliant work environment. This was an 88% of the strategic focus. How do you create a more work-life balance? This was 80% of their focus. And how do you create a more higher profile around innovation and products and services? 67% of our respondents said that this was important for their life science business. But interestingly, as I mentioned before, life science leaders rely heavily on client and company brands and reputations. 50% of life science and pharma leaders are investing in talent marketing, which is 22% less than the global average. So it goes to say that actually as an industry, it certainly doesn't need to, in theory, be investing in this type of activity, but in reality, could some of the challenges that exist within the industry be due to underinvestment as well? What's really interesting in the life science industry, though, is that leaders are investing in different things around talent strategy. So it's not so much around the permanent workforce that they're focusing. Actually, 57% say they're investing in talent marketing for temporary staff, which is the highest of all the sectors, and 73% are saying that they're investing in talent marketing for freelancers and independent contractors, which again is the highest of all the sectors, which shows that the industry is moving towards maybe a more skill-based recruitment approach, thinking more about talent in a holistic way rather than thinking of it in silos, and therefore maybe adopting a different approach in the talent strategies to answer the challenge of the business. Are flexible workers, freelancers, independent contractors a good opportunity for them to be able to succeed? One of the challenges that we've seen with one of our customers was really focusing on culture. Unfortunately, their need to grow coincided with just at the same time as the great challenges that were happening across the world with trying to come out of the pandemic. So they decided to really invest in talent acquisition. They thought this was what they needed. They needed more people. They needed to be able to scale up as quickly as possible. But what they didn't realize is, in fact, they had an issue within their culture, and it caused a huge amount of attrition within their business, something that they hadn't planned for and weren't really prepared to be able to address. This culture, as we investigated it with them, we were able to identify, similar to what Patricia was saying, which is the scalability of the business had put the business under pressure. People were really suffering because they needed to deliver, leadership needed to deliver, production needed to deliver, clients were expecting high results. And unfortunately, that changed the culture of the workplace, and it meant people were leaving. So in reality, they didn't have a talent acquisition problem. They actually had a more cultural issue within their business. So therefore, we needed to address that as well. So in combination with the talent acquisition strategy and an external partner, we were able to work with the local business and be able to support them to be able to change the way that they're culturally were organized, retraining leadership on the importance of people engagement and how to support well-being, and put that at the center of what they were behaving and how they were behaving within their business, rather than the need to be able to deliver customer requirements and meet production goals. So there's some advice for you, things that hopefully you can take away from today. Surveying and interviewing your people can help you find better policies and better support their lives. But some other things you could look at in addition to surveying and understanding more about them is, as they say on screen, safety. Can you provide people with a safe environment, making sure that they feel safe and giving them that reassurance? Provide opportunities for your workforce to share feedback, as we said, through survey tools. Consider expanding employee assistance resources, including financial and non-monetary aid, which also will support them. And I think I heard some of that in previous presentations as well. Monitor how external and internal talent feel about experiences working or engaging with you through such platforms like Glassdoor. Also regularly comment on these feedback that you receive, making it clear that you care and you're addressing such needs, or being able to respond and show that you as an organization are responsive. More than ever, though, focus on measuring engagement and productivities, as these are two massive indicators that give you a really good indication, as Patricia mentioned before, around sentiments and stress, and can be really good early warning signs around potential challenges that you might face ahead. So moving on to the fourth pillar, which is actually trend number 3. Our research shows that human capital leaders continue to value the power of data. 79% says talent analytics plays a critical role in sourcing, attracting, engaging, and retaining talent. And a similar percentage says the same about external market intelligence. But what's interesting is when we dive into the life science sector, and how does this play against the averages that we see in our survey? The life science sector is showing that there is a clear difference between the way that internal talent analytics and external market intelligence is used by the way that this survey has been responded to. Interestingly, 70% say talent analytics play a critical role in sourcing and their strategy, which is one of the lowest scoring, whereas 83% say that the external market intelligence is important, which is again 5% points higher than the average. So therefore, life science is actually the highest interested party or industry for external data, which creates a really interesting dynamic, which is there's less interest, or let's say less focus on the internal data and more focus on the external data. I don't know what that means, and ultimately you as industry leaders will know more about how you are using this data and whether this is relevant for you and whether you recognize this. But I think it's a really interesting outcome from the report to show that maybe there's more focus on external than internal. But what's important is to say that 73% of talent leaders are investing in analytics. And I think listening to the previous presenter, Patricia, that's clearly where you have been focusing as well. And although investment is needed, it's what you do with the information is really the key point, and how you use that to drive it, including building platforms such as predictive capabilities, and how do you plan for a better workforce dynamic. Of course, we work with lots of different customers, as you would imagine, who are all suffering very similar challenges to what we see and what we've heard about already today. Investments in strategic workforce planning is quite different in many companies. What we are seeing is that we're seeing a lot of companies buying data or trying to get access to data, whether that's through companies who have this as a core product service offering, or whether that's working with partners like Randstad to be able to get access to some of the enterprise level data that companies like Randstad has. And this is certainly something where we see companies continuing to develop and evolve. We have had examples of where our customers have worked with us and we've supported them with key decisions, for example, about where to locate production facilities, where to house their new shared service centres. So we've been able to support them with strategic decision making. But I think one of the big topics at the moment that we're certainly seeing is how do you bring some of these market insights, external market insights and internal market insights into the users on the ground. So with your hiring manager conversations, and how do you bring that into those discussions to support maybe salary negotiations, or whether the role has been categorized in the right grade or whatever it may be. And this is certainly something that we're feeling is where the utilization of external data can be really impactful, in addition to, of course, the more strategic decision making. So moving on to the advice and what can we support you with here today. So as I said, every company is having their challenges with data and how to best utilize it. We've almost got too much to a certain extent with power data coming from our HRIS and from external data sources, etc. What we would certainly recommend is investment in data scientists and engineers. This will give you better control and understanding of what's possible, and bring it with it, hopefully, some best practices. Try to limit the amount of data that you bring and bring it in a more meaningful way. So therefore make it more valuable. Prioritizing data dashboards, of course, and then partner with, as it says here, talent analytics and market intelligence specialists, just to give you some additional support. And then ultimately build a good, clear roadmap about how to be able to develop this further, because ultimately the power is in the data and how to use that data effectively.